UFC London Fight Week. Let's go. Yeah, this is a really fun fight night, a really fun card that we have ahead of ourselves. Headlined by Leon Edwards, a former UFC welterweight champion coming off the loss to Belal Muhammad. And then you have an extremely promising contender in Sean Brady, who is a very well-rounded, great fighter in this stacked welterweight division. The original fight was supposed to be Leon Edwards versus Jack Della Maddalena. But here we are with Sean Brady getting the replacement, a fight that he wanted. He wanted to fight on this card versus Leon, and he got what he asked for. The biggest fight of his life is now. I mean, you win this fight, for Sean Brady, he immediately could be up next for a title or in the title conversation. We don't know what the situation is with Shavkat. Shavkat, had an injury. He was supposed to fight Belal at 315, but then he got injured, so they ended up offering the shot to Jack Della Maddalena. And that's where we see ourselves here with this new fight. But I must say, I was really looking forward to the Leon Edwards and Jack Della Maddalena fight. I thought that fight made perfect sense the way that it was initially announced. Jack Della Maddalena, who's been out for a while with an injury, I think with his arm or something, he tore something. Extremely also promising contender in the welterweight division that came off the strong win versus Gilbert Burns in Miami. So this was the perfect stepping stone for Jack to then get to the title, was to go through the number one contender who just lost the belt. Two great strikers. And that would have been a really good fight. I had no doubt about that. It would have been a banging fight to have Jack Della versus Leon in London, where Leon reps the flag. So yeah, unfortunately, the layout and the plans have shifted for welterweight, but I really like Sean Brady a lot, and I'm happy he's getting this opportunity. Now, before we get into this main card fight, just look at the card overall. High-profile co-main event by Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg. It's a light heavyweight bout. We'll get into that. You got Kevin Holland coming back, fulfilling his promise of fighting every 2 months. He's fighting Gunnar Nelson, who's returning, I guess, trying to get more familiar with him. And then you have plenty of English talent on the card. Molly McCann, Jordan Vucenic, Nathaniel Wood, Loner Kavanagh, Jai Herbert, and Nick Parkin, and more. So really fun card overall. A really good fight night that I'm happy with, at least. And it starts with these two right here. Sean Brady versus Leon Edwards. So as I just mentioned, Sean Brady gets to step up the call when Jack Della Maddalena gets called up to fight Belal. He's 17-1. He's coming off the fight night main event win off Gilbert Burns. And he's facing Leon Edwards, who was the former UFC welterweight champion. We all know him for his famous headshot dead moment when he head kicked Kamaru Usman in the last round of their first title fight. And Leon Edwards really had his claim to fame from that, but he was already a very elite welterweight who was well established in the rankings. And here he is trying to get a bounce-back fight versus Sean Brady after losing the title in a very lackluster and underwhelming performance versus Belal. I remember how frustrated I was when me and my friends were watching, and we were expecting a little bit more from Leon, but he was getting dropped on his head top by Belal. Belal was having his way with him in the striking exchanges. I'm disgusted that Belal Muhammad is right now representing the UFC as the welterweight champion. I really am. I really don't like him. I want it to change hands as soon as possible, and we have to keep on waiting for Shavkat to get the opportunity. Because Belal, whether I like him or not, I have to give respect when it's due. He's a very well-rounded fighter. He not just that he trains with the Team Khabib, but he's got the skills, he's got the striking, the wrestling. He's a real threat. And it was just like Magomed Ankalaev. Belal was being pushed away from the UFC for a long time before he finally got his title shot, before they couldn't deny him any longer. Because we don't want to see these type of guys become champions, but unfortunately with UFC and mixed martial arts, that's how it works. The best fight's the best. It's not like WWE. It's not scripted. So, yeah, these are two guys that are in the top echelon of a stacked welterweight division. You look at the landscape of the welterweight division, there's so many killers in this division right now. Besides the old guard with Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman, and I guess Leon Edwards could be in that category. You have the new generation of welterweight. You have some really scary guys coming up in the rankings, like Michael Morales, who I think is going to beat Gilbert Burns 15-0. I think Carlos Prates is going to end up beating Jeff Neal. He's on the rise. Of course, you got Ian Gary, who's going to be breaking out probably as a welterweight superstar. He's got the personality and type for it. Sean Brady is definitely in that class. Joaquin Buckley is making a resurgence in his career after just being a kind of fight night type of guy. Now where he's in talks for a main event versus Kamaru Usman probably next. And then Colby Covington always still in the picture. Jack Della Maddalena. Welterweight. And then, of course, there's Shavkat. Shavkat, the boogeyman of the division. He's 18-0. We're still waiting for him to get that title shot after his win versus Ian Gary at 310. But here it is, Leon Edwards. And I think my narrative is that this is the end of Leon Edwards. I truly believe that Leon is going to lose this fight to Sean Brady. Leon Edwards, he was at the height of his champion status after the headshot dead moment versus Kamaru Usman. The rematch, I get it, you got the title defense with Colby, but I just feel like at this point, following the title loss to Belal Muhammad, he's going to just bounce off the mountain top one by one and see what we've seen with a couple fighters. I don't want to, kind of like an Israel Adesanya situation where now there's a bunch of hungry, up-and-coming talent in the welterweight division, and he's just going to fall lower and lower down the mountain. Of course, if Leon Edwards wins this, he reestablishes himself as an elite number one contender for the belt. Whoever wins this fight, I would assume, is going to fight the winner of, first, Jack Della Maddalena and Belal Muhammad is going to happen, and then you're going to have Shavkat fight the winner of that. And then whoever wins the Shavkat fight would then face the winner of this. I think that makes the most sense moving forward. You see over here Leon Edwards' career. Before the Belal Muhammad loss, he had 4 straight wins. One versus Nate Diaz. Kamaru Usman in the first title fight where he got the crazy head kick KO. Then the rematch, defended the title again versus Colby Covington. A really good championship resume for Leon Edwards, and then he lost to Belal, and that was a rematch after the no contest when Belal got eye poked and he was crying around the mat like a baby. And a couple other notable wins are Rafael dos Santos, Darnell Cerrone, and Gunnar Nelson. I think there was always a fight that was supposed to happen between him and Shavkat Rakhmonov. Between Khamzat Chimaev. That just never happened, never came into fruition when Khamzat was still in the welterweight division. And you look at Sean Brady, the only loss he's had in his UFC run so far is to the current welterweight champion, Belal Muhammad. And even that, wasn't such a bad fight on his part, but ultimately, it's saying here that Belal KO'd him in the second round by TKO stoppage. His most notable wins being his last win versus Gilbert Burns. That was probably the biggest opponent he's beaten so far. And then Kevin Gastelum, Michael Chiesa. Before the Belal Muhammad fight, he was undefeated, but now he's 17-1, and this is the fight that he wanted. This is the biggest fight of Sean Brady's life right here, to beat the number one contender and be put in a title shot right after you maybe necessarily were due for someone a little bit less than this, but the opportunity falls into your lap. You got to take advantage of it, and I think that's what Sean Brady's going to do. He's going to go in there, he's going to attack the game plan and do what he needs to do. Just like Magomed Ankalaev did against Alex Pereira. Alex Pereira was a favored striker. He's a favored champion, but the reality is sometimes that just is what it is. But I like Sean Brady a lot. I think he's really cool. His aesthetic, and I think he's good friends with Joe Bodybags Pyfer. And so yeah, Leon Edwards, I just think this is the beginning of the downfall for Leon. With against Sean Brady. So we will see how this goes. Then in the co-main event, a very good high-profile co-main event, Jan Blachowicz versus Carlos Ulberg. Carlos Ulberg has been coming up through the rankings in light heavyweight. His name was being thrown around to fight Alex Pereira next, potentially before Magomed, but that was a little crazy talk that Carlos Ulberg would get that chance. I remember he was also scheduled to fight Khalil Roundtree at 303, and then both of them fell off the card. And he got his last win in UFC Macau. He's taking on Jan Blachowicz, who is a former UFC light heavyweight champion. You look at Jan Blachowicz's career, his last fight was to Alex Pereira when Alex Pereira made his light heavyweight debut. So that was his last fight, which he lost in a close decision. Some people would say maybe that he won that fight. And he also made Alex Pereira look a little bit human. And he had to draw with Magomed Ankalaev. Magomed was robbed of his title, I guess. That was he kept on referring to that as the first time he should have been champion, so he was long overdue. And then Blachowicz also beat Alexander Rakic. He beat Israel Adesanya, who at the time Israel Adesanya came into that fight as like the peak fighter that he was, undefeated, and he was looking for double champ status. And Jan Blachowicz beat Israel Adesanya, also Dominic Reyes. So yeah, Luke Rockhold, Nikita Krylov. Jan Blachowicz is, at this point, I would like to say, a veteran in the light heavyweight division. He has quite the history. He's run through some of the former champions, and he's had some really great fights. And he's a high-profile light heavyweight, so this is a great co-main event on this card. And I think the winner of this, what makes the most sense is you do either the winner of this versus Yuri Prochazka. I mean, if Jan Blachowicz wins, maybe you give him Magomed as his first title defense. I would prefer Yuri over Jan Blachowicz for the next title shot in Magomed if they don't do the rematch. But most likely, Alex Pereira is getting that rematch. So I think what makes sense next in the matchmaking is the winner of this will fight Yuri Prochazka. And I don't know. I feel like Jan Blachowicz will reinstate himself in the conversations. I want to believe that he's going to use his depth and experience, and he's a very well-rounded fighter, to have his way with Carlos Ulberg and have Carlos Ulberg respect Jan Blachowicz again, like respect the skills and the pedigree that Jan Blachowicz is on, because right now Jan Blachowicz is looked at in a different light. At a certain point, he was looked at as a very great champion, but now he's on a 2-fight skid. So I think Jan Blachowicz is going to get this versus Carlos Ulberg. Although Carlos Ulberg, he has fast hands, he maybe could pull it off. And then Kevin Holland versus Gunnar Nelson. So apparently this guy Gunnar Nelson seems to be one of the only fighters in the UFC from Iceland, which is pretty cool, but he's returning after a long layoff. We haven't seen him in a while. He actually fought Leon Edwards, we just saw from his stats. But apparently he's been around. I don't know much about him. And then Kevin Holland's just like a journeyman at this point. He's just, even the last fight, UFC 311, I was still excited about Kevin Holland, even though he lost the fight before that versus Roman Dolidze, but that was to a fractured rib. So we're going to give him, I wanted to give him the benefit of the doubt. He just got the fractured, but still he was getting dominated in the first couple minutes of that fight versus Roman Dolidze. Before that, he had the crazy armbar versus Olazechuk at UFC 302. So I'm like, okay, Kevin Holland's, and he's just an entertaining personality. We know that Kevin Holland is never going to get at the belt. We know that. He's like a King Green. They're never going to get to the belts, but they keep on coming to take more fights with the division, but they keep on getting fed to the hungrier, younger guys to be just stepping stones for these guys to showcase. Like these Kevin Hollands and King Greens are given up to younger fighters as showcase performances. And Kevin Holland's just, every couple fights, you win some, you lose some. I mean, he's gone up to toe-to-toe with some of the most elite fighters in this game. We could go through his resume. He's been fluctuating between middleweight, welterweight. And I think this is him returning to welterweight because he hasn't found success at middleweight. Clearly losing his last fight to Reinier de Ridder, but he's still an exciting personality that I look forward to seeing on UFC cards. Like the Reinier de Ridder fight, I was still excited to see him fight, although it's just so frustrating. He got choked out in the first round by Reinier de Ridder. And that was just like a joke. You're just taking fights every 2 months, but like just for the check. So Kevin Holland, he's just a frustrating fighter at this point. You just gotta not take him serious anymore. Just is what it is. But with that being said, some people will be like, I think Kevin Holland will have a bounce back win here. I think that he's due for a win, and it's now. I think he's gonna bounce back somehow and win this fight versus Gunnar Nelson. And if he doesn't, maybe he should just be put on the prelims of a fight night or cut from the UFC completely. Because then at that point, he's really just down bad and a disgrace. Kevin Holland. But still an exciting fight. Still a fighter that I enjoy seeing just because of his personality. Sometimes he's good on the mic. And he has a few moments, but he's a UFC vet. He's been around for a while. So Kevin Holland was sprinkled on here, fulfilling his promise of fighting every 2 months. And then Molly McCann, a good English female fighter that they put on the card. Jordan Vucenic versus Chris Duncan. This guy's only had one fight in the UFC so far. Crazy tats. But yeah, Jordan Vucenic, I think he lost his last fight to Guram. That was his only fight and he lost. And I don't know, I kind of just think this fight is up for grabs. I don't really know the difference between these two fighters. I haven't really followed Jordan Vucenic or Chris Duncan. Again, this guy's only had one UFC fight, Jordan, and Chris Duncan, I don't know much about him. So this fight could be hopefully a cool, fun fight in the card. And then Nathaniel Wood versus Morgan Charriere. Now, Morgan Charriere is one of those fighters. He's really not well known, but he's the type of fighter that I've taken notice to because of how he's been exciting. And he had a really exciting finish in his last fight at UFC Paris versus the guy with the mustache. He had this funny mustache. Morgan Charriere is an exciting fighter. 20-10. He's a short featherweight, but when this guy goes into the octagon, I'm expecting fireworks. He's that kind of guy, and right now he's just in he's kind of on a momentum right now. In fact, if you look at his record real quick, Morgan Charriere, all three of his he lost that fight versus Mariscal, but one versus Zakiti, and then also sick highlight KO versus Miranda. So I'm excited to see what he's got on the main card opener. I think the UFC knew what they were doing, putting Charriere on the main card. He's an exciting fighter, taking on Nathaniel Wood, who's also, definitely a big test, a big step up in competition for Morgan. 21-6, another one of the more staple English fighters on the roster. So Morgan Charriere, I think he's gonna win. Hopefully it's in a highlight kind of way to open up this main card. Then Jai Herbert, I only know him as being the fool that got knocked out by Ilia Topuria, so they put him on here versus Chris Padilla. Loner Kavanagh is an exciting up-and-coming prospect. He is undefeated. He came from the Dana White Contender Series. He's 8-0. He had first UFC fight at UFC Macau. He won. Now they put him on here. He's from England, so it makes sense. And having him and Charriere on here is just a sick combination. These two, I would say that Loner Kavanagh, you got to watch out. He's going to be a real someone, I think, in this flyweight division. I think he's got the look. He's got the crisp fighting style. He's taking on Felipe dos Santos. I think this fight is designed for Loner Kavanagh to continue to build up his name, like a Mauricio Ruffy, continue to have these step-up fights, but that aren't too steep, but enough of a position. Either he's going to get fraud checked, or Loner Kavanagh is going to thrive and display another knockout, and then you see him at 9-0. He's kind of like a Peyton Talbot. He's a prospect that needs to be checked a little bit, but right now he's got the undefeated record, won his UFC debut, and if he could get an exciting finish, I think a lot of people are going to notice him a lot more. Then Marcin Tybura versus Mick Parkin, a ranked heavyweight bout in the prelims. It's just down bad in the heavyweight division when you got two ranked heavyweight fighters in your prelims. Curtis Blaydes was supposed to be a featured prelim, even though he's a top 5 ranked guy, but Marcin Tybura is just a jobber at this point. He's lost to Spivak, Tom Aspinall, although his last fight he's coming off the win. Who did he beat? I don't remember, but he's just this heavyweight jobber that just hopping around. I think Mick Parkin, and I think Mick Parkin trains with Tom Aspinall. So Mick Parkin, I think this fight, he's going to bypass Marcin Tybura and move up in the rankings. 10-0, seems to look the part, but then again, Marcin Tybura could hold his ground and, a well-established heavyweight who's been in the rankings for a couple of years. Not like any kind of real deal heavyweight, but maybe he fraud checks Mick Parkin, right? This is a test for Mick Parkin, just like it's a test for Loner Kavanagh, to see if these fighters are really about it. So this is the step up in competition Mick Parkin is going to have, and I think he's going to win and beat Marcin Tybura. And then you got Christian Leroy Duncan trying to come up from bounce back after the RoboCop loss to Gregory Rodriguez. Got this woman fight, Nate Fletcher fight, and then Guram Kutladze, who I mentioned, beat Jordan Vucenic in Jordan Vucenic's first fight. Guram, yeah, they might shift this around, but right now he's a main card opener, and he's actually a fighter I know about. He trains with, he's Georgian, he's Georgian, he trains with Ilia Topuria and Merab Tavalishvili, so yeah, they call him, I guess, the Georgian Viking. So we got Guram to open up the card. Guram, maybe he could, one day be at the bottom of the lightweight rankings. But right now I don't see him beating guys like Yoel Alvarez or who else is unranked, or Mauricio Ruffy in lightweight. I think maybe in the future when the old guard goes out, but right now I don't think Guram even beats the most elite non-ranked lightweights. So that's just my opinion on him, but he could come out with a statement win in his opening fight. The rest of the card, as I mentioned, is great. Mick Parkin and Loner Kavanagh, two exciting up-and-coming prospects out of England. Then Morgan Charriere versus Nathaniel Wood. Hopefully it's a fireworks fight to open up the main card. Jordan Vucenic versus Chris Duncan, and then you got Kevin Holland. And then the high-profile co-main event versus Jan Blachowicz and Carlos Ulberg and then Leon Edwards versus Sean Brady. And yeah, is this the end of Leon Edwards? I believe so. I do. And we'll see this weekend if that really is the case. Sean Brady could become an instant number one contender overnight. Or will Leon Edwards surprise me and get the win to reestablish himself in the conversation for a title? But that's what I think. I think this is the end of Leon Edwards and his glory days as being an exciting fighter in the UFC.